Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Stephanie.
I'm Tom.
Hey, it's day 3 of our literature unit. So we're going to be focusing on the novel The Sympathizer and some of the themes that you'll find in the book. We like to ask ourselves, what was the author trying to communicate? And our authors here, his name is Viet Thanh Nguyen. That's the English pronunciation, guys. Neither Tom nor I have ever studied Vietnamese. So we're just going to go with the good old English pronunciation of the names. We kind of slaughter the names, which just means we say it really badly. We're going to talk about what our author was trying to communicate. I talked to one of the editors here who read the novel and really enjoyed it. And he told me that the author's in his 40s. And it is interesting because I think it's the first time we get the perspective of someone from Vietnam on the war. Usually hear the perspective of Americans, or what they felt about it, especially if you're an American and you grew up in America. But this is actually a novel written from the perspective of someone who is Vietnamese, but also spent a significant amount of time in America. His English is very good.
Indeed. So this is a novel about a spy who is working for the Vietnamese communists, the current government of Vietnam. And we also refer to them as the North Vietnamese, which no longer exists because it's a unified country now. But again, we're talking about The Sympathizer, and we're actually going into detail today. We're going to talk about some of the themes and ideas in our featured work of literature for the month of March. So let's get to it. Let's read through the entire contents of our lesson right now.
With its vivid detail and dark wit, Viet Thanh Nguyen's The Sympathizer is a tale of identity, suspicion, and divided loyalty in the aftermath of the Vietnam War. Beginning in the weeks leading up to the fall of Saigon, the novel introduces us to the captain, a communist spy in the service of a high-ranking official. As the book progresses, his double role within the conflict becomes increasingly dubious. Identity is one of the book's central themes. As the illegitimate mixed-race child of a French priest and a Vietnamese villager, the captain has been made to feel like an outsider from a very young age. This divided sense of belonging is what initially leads him to consider himself an ideal spy, as he is simply able to see any issue from both sides. While this self-professed objectivity does make the captain a superb narrator at times, it is not long before he finds his moral compass at odds with the orders he receives from both the general and his communist masters. While the captain may not be a moral hero, he nonetheless attempts to do what is right at several points in the story. His decision to risk his life to save Bone is an outstanding example of this. It is in these later chapters where he directly disobeys his masters, knowing that he may be imprisoned or killed for doing so, that the captain truly displays his humanity. Bone, his childhood friend, is the closest the captain has to family. In a conflict that has split his already fragmented identity, Bone is the captain's only link to a time when he did not have to hide behind a mask.
Let's talk about the lesson for today, everybody. Again, we're kind of looking at some of the details of our featured work of literature for the month of March, and it's a novel entitled The Sympathizer. Now, here in the first paragraph it says, with its vivid detail and dark wit, Viet Tan Wins the Sympathizer is a tale of identity, suspicion, and divided loyalty in the aftermath of the Vietnam War. Okay, so here again, we're talking about the novel as having lots of vivid detail, which means it has a lot of detail, a lot of information that you can imagine, that you can see clearly in your mind as you read this book. And it also has some dark wit. Wit is kind of like humor, but it usually refers to a very perceptive way of seeing things and coming up with the very clever descriptions of those things in life. But this is dark wit, okay, which might be kind of pessimistic a little bit because it's kind of looking at the dark side of the world and spies and war and stuff like that. Yeah, you could expect that in such a novel.
Oftentimes when you will hear this description, dark wit or dark humor, it usually has to do with death, too. So, yeah, prepare yourselves. So that's the name of our author, Viet Thanh Nguyen, and it is a tale of identity, who you are. Who are you really? So, yeah, it's a tale of identity. Do you show people who you are? Suspicion. If you're a spy, you're suspicious of everybody. Because you know that you can't be trusted either. And divided loyalty. Is he loyal to his friends or to his communist masters or even to the general who is his enemy, of course? So this is told in an era right after the Vietnam War. Aftermath just means in the aftermath of the war. What happens after something takes place? That's the aftermath. I don't know if we use it so much when we're speaking, but we definitely use it in writing. So aftermath just means, you know, the after effects, the consequences of some event, especially something that's unpleasant.
Right, so there might be some kind of disaster or something. Maybe a typhoon comes to Taiwan, and then we talk about the aftermath of the typhoon. What happened afterwards? We found people who were hurt or killed, and how we fixed things up again, how we returned to normal. That's the aftermath of a typhoon. And yes, the Vietnam War ended, I believe, in 1975. And then, of course, we had the aftermath and all the things that happened after the war ended. And beginning in the weeks leading up to the fall of Saigon, the novel introduces us to the captain, a communist spy in the service of a high-ranking official. So, yes, indeed, this novel begins just before the fall of Saigon, in the weeks leading up to the fall of Saigon. So leading up to just means before something happened, and then talking about the events that happened up to that time.
Right. So beginning in the weeks leading up to the fall, that's when we meet the captain, as Tom said. Now, as the book progresses, or as you get further into the book, his double role within the conflict becomes increasingly dubious. If something's dubious, wow, you don't hear this word much. It's a great word. Dubious just means something that you kind of start suspecting. It's doubtful. It's questionable, especially the value of something. You know, maybe you've got a friend who wants to go on a trip abroad, and they ended up on a website that was selling tickets at a really low price, and you think, ugh, that looks dubious. Can we really trust that? It looks a little bit like it's a shady deal, or it's morally wrong. So dubious. So what he's doing is he is playing two roles. He's playing a role as a communist spy, and he's also pretending to be loyal to the South Vietnamese general that, they're all evacuated to America at one point after the war.
Yeah, dubious here kind of means like it has two sort of meanings to it in a way. Like, for example, I could say, hey, I just won a great prize, okay? I was elected the biggest idiot in Taiwan. Okay, well, I'm number one there. That's great, but for the wrong reason there. Who wants to be the biggest idiot in Taiwan? So that is a dubious distinction, okay? You're the best, but for something bad. And in this particular case, though, his role in the conflict is kind kind of doubtful. Yes, he might be loyal to his government, but he might actually start having sympathies for the other side. Now, here in the next paragraph, it says, identity is one of the book's central themes. Identity just means who you are, how you describe yourself, how you identify yourself.
He's the illegitimate mixed-race child of a French priest and a Vietnamese villager. We know that Vietnam was a French colony for a long time. So a lot of French is spoken over there. They've got a lot of French dishes that have been kind of made into this wonderful mix of Vietnamese and French. It's wonderful. I like the food over there. But his father is a French priest. They're not even supposed to be having sex as Catholic priests. So that's kind of gross. And he probably slept with a young, beautiful Vietnamese girl. She's a villager. So he doesn't feel great about his background either. Mixed race children are sometimes treated poorly in some countries. They're discriminated against. So the captain has been made to feel, this means other people make him feel this way, like he's an outsider. You know, he doesn't belong in Vietnam, but he doesn't belong in France. You know, where does he belong? It's terrible to feel like an outsider.
It definitely is, and if you're foreigners living in Taiwan, sometimes you can feel like an outsider, and I'm sure for some of you who have studied overseas and you're the only Taiwanese person in your neighborhood, you might feel like an outsider as well. So the captain has felt like an outsider ever since he was very young. I'm guessing because he was of mixed blood heritage, or I guess we often say biracial. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for the first half of our lesson. Let's now listen to our Chinese teacher.
Hello, my name is Shelby. 今天要看《The Sympathizer》同情者这本书的主题。第一段是前言，随着生动的细节和暗黑机智，阮月清的《同情者》这本书是一本 identity 身份、suspicion 悬疑以及 divided loyalty 分裂的忠诚的故事。loyalty 忠诚。对某人忠诚就可以说 be loyal to somebody。 书中的主角表面忠于将军，又是北越的间谍，两边都扮演效忠 divided loyalty 一心分饰二主。后面的 aftermath 事情结束后的时期，常写成 in the aftermath of something 在越战结束之后的时期。第二句，故事一开始是前几周 leading up to the fall。 lead up to 加名词，表示在什么事情之前，在西贡沦落之前。这本小说介绍了 the captain 上尉是高阶军官的共产党员。第三句，随着故事的发展， progress 动词前进或进行，事情当主词，表示某事持续的发展。如果人当主词，表示进步。He progresses in his studies. 他学习有进步。他的双重角色在冲突中变得越来越 dubious， 加上 increasingly 表示逐渐、渐渐地。接着我们到第二段 ，identity 身份认同是主题之一。第二句，身为私生子 ，the captain 上尉一直都被迫觉得像个 outsider 局外人。第三句 ，this divided sense of belonging 这种剥离的归属感是起初引导他认为自己是一个理想的间谍。sense of belonging 归属感 ，what 子句当作主词补语，里面动词 leads him to consider 在表示使某人做某事，有时还含有误导的意思，通常就会用 lead somebody to do something。所以这里呢，误导他以为自己是一个理想的间谍，因为他能看到两边。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. We're talking about the novel The Sympathizer and talking about some of the central themes. or the motifs in the book, what the author is trying to communicate. And right there in the first paragraph, it just says it's a tale or story of identity, suspicion, and divided loyalty. And it's set right after the Vietnam War ended. So it's kind of interesting. We don't have a lot of books in this written from this perspective or in this period of time that aren't written by Americans or people that were part of the military over there. So it's kind of fun to read a different perspective. Our author is Viet Thanh Nguyen, and he writes about a guy named Captain. He's a captain in the military. He's a communist spy. So he is loyal to North Vietnam during the war, although he's working in South Vietnam for a general as his trusted aide. Of course, he is not to be trusted because he's a spy. So we know that identity is one of the book's central themes. Our captain doesn't feel great about himself. He was always made to feel like he didn't belong anywhere. He's mixed race, he's biracial. And so he's got this divided sense of belonging inside himself. So what initially leads him to consider himself to be an ideal spy, he felt like, I'll be perfect for this. I can see both sides. He felt like he was able to see any issue from both sides. At least that's what he told himself.
Exactly. So, yeah, that means you can see things from both sides. You have some great perspective on different things. And while this self-professed objectivity does make the captain a superb narrator at times, it is not long before he finds his moral compass at odds with the orders he receives from both the general and his communist masters. Okay, so yes, we have this self-professed objectivity. Objectivity refers to when you are objective, when you're not biased, when you can look at something as if you're an outsider, basically, and you're not involved and you're not biased. This is always a problem with people and their political affiliations. If you hear somebody expressing political views, well, what are you? Are you KMT or are you DPP? Because you're going to be subjective. You're not going to be objective. People try to be objective, but sometimes it's very difficult. But he thinks he's objective here because, well, he's different from everybody else. He's biracial, and maybe that can make him a superb narrator at times. Superb just means really great, excellent. Hey, this is superb tea. Thank you for serving me this wonderful oolong tea. It's superb. And a narrator, of course, is somebody who tells a story.
Right. It's kind of fun. Sometimes they'll have narrators in movies. So you hear a voice telling the stories, you watch the action and the actors, acting out the film. But yeah, he's a superb narrator because of this ability, he thinks, to tell, to look at an issue from both sides. But it's not long before he finds his moral compass at odds with the orders he receives. Your moral compass is just kind of that feeling inside yourself of what you think is right and wrong. And that feeling inside, your gut reaction, kind of lets you make decisions based on what you personally think is the right thing to do. Now, if that moral compass is at odds with something, it just means they clash. They don't work well together. What your moral compass is telling you is exactly the opposite of what you're facing. So he gets orders, of course, from the general, but also his communist leaders or masters. So this makes it difficult. He probably doesn't feel very much at peace most of the time because he would feel like never feeling like, he's pleasing everybody or what he's being asked to do. Maybe feels bad inside himself based on his own moral compass or his own principles that he wants to live his life on.
Right, so I guess basically sometimes he questions who is right and who is wrong. He's working for the communists here, but maybe he's also sympathizing with the South Vietnamese, the general, and that's why he's at odds with his leaders.
I just want to mention I kind of said at odds meant you were clashing with your morals. It means you're it's a conflict. There's some sort of conflict. Clash just means things conflict as well. So there's a conflict going on with how he feels inside and what he's being told to do.
Indeed. Okay, so let's move on now to the next paragraph here. It says, while the captain may not be a moral hero, he nonetheless attempts to do what is right at several points in the story. So, yeah, in this story, the captain really isn't our big hero here. He's not really a moral hero, not someone we can learn from, but still, nonetheless, he tries to do what is right at many different points in the story. So that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, that was my thought. After I finished reading this, I thought, he's not some great hero that you can look up to. But there are points in this story, guys, where he does make the right decision. So we find out his decision to risk his life to save his buddy Bone is an outstanding example of this. Right. I remember when he says, it was a foolish mission to go back to Vietnam and try to retake Vietnam. He said it was a crazy, foolish suicide mission, and yet he was willing to go back himself because he wanted to help save his friend who was already involved. So it's in the later chapters where he directly disobeys his masters. I think he's probably we're talking about the communists there. Well, in the general, they don't want him to leave America. So if you disobey, it just means you are not listening to whoever's telling you what to do. You are kind of just ignoring what they say if you disobey. We use this word a lot when we talk about kids disobeying their parents or school kids disobeying the teacher. You're not following the rules. You're doing exactly what they don't want you to do.
Right, so if you're a soldier, of course, you need to obey your orders. But if you disobey your orders, hey, you could be in big trouble. So again, he does directly disobey his masters sometimes. And he does this knowing that he may be imprisoned or killed for doing so. And of course, if you're imprisoned, you're put in prison, you're put in jail. Or he may have been killed or executed, perhaps, and it is only in these times that the captain truly displays his humanity. And your humanity means basically knowing what is right and what is wrong and caring for your fellow human beings.
Doing the right thing because you do care about your fellow human beings. Now, Bone is his childhood friend. They've known each other forever and is the closest the captain has to family. In a conflict that has split his already fragmented identity, Bone is the captain's only link to a time when he did not have to hide behind a mask, where he could just be who he really was. Fragmented means something's broken into pieces. So a fragment just means if you use it as a noun, a fragment of something, it means a small part that's been broken or separated off from something else. If you drop a glass or you drop your mirror, sometimes it will break and fragments will, go all over the floor. Fragmented here is an adjective, and it just means something has been separated or broken apart. And we're talking about his identity. So, yeah, I bet he gets kind of confused and just tired sometimes having to be a spy and lying and pretending and never being his true self.
But he's got that good friend Bone, and Bone is the captain's only link or connection to a time when he did not have to hide behind a mask. And hopefully someday the captain will be able to take that mask off and not have to hide anymore. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation, but right now we need to hear from our Chinese teacher.
第四句 While this self-professed objectivity profess 声称Self-professed 自认为的 Objectivity 客观这种自以为是的客观的确让上尉是个优秀的叙事者 At times 或者 sometimes 有时候 It is not long before 子句相当于中文的不久后某事就怎么样没多久呢他发现他的 moral compass 道德罗盘 at odds with the others。At odds with somebody or something 表示和某人或某事不合，他本身的道德与他从两边收到的命令不一致，起冲突了。他开始觉醒，产生自我怀疑。到第3段，故事就渐渐走到尾声，他的自觉越来越明显。第一句，虽然尚未不是个 moral hero， moral 道德表示品性端正的英雄， he nonetheless仍然试着去做正确的事情。第二句，他决定去 risk his life， 冒生命的危险。risk 冒险，后面加名词或者 VING， 表示冒着什么的危险。去救阿邦就是个例子。第3句是个分裂句，主要句子由 It is in these later chapters 跳接到后面的 that the captain truly displays his humanity， 在后面的章节尚未展现自己的人性，将强调的在这些章节中放在 it is 后面，再加 that 子句中其余的部分。而在 these chapters 逗点之后，用 where 开头的形容词子句来修饰。He directly disobeys 违反他的长官，知道他可能被关或者是被杀。Imprisoned 被监禁。接着呢，阿邦是他最接近家人的朋友。最后一句 In a conflict 在一个冲突中， that 撕裂他早已 fragmented identity。 Fragment 碎片或者破碎， fragmented identity 支离破碎的身份认同。阿邦是尚未唯一的联系 the only link to something， 对某一个时期。 when 是在那时期，相当于 in which 当形容词子句来修饰前面的 a time。 他不必藏匿在面具之下，也就是说，在面对阿邦的时候，他无需隐藏自己，是唯一可以显露 true color 真实本色的人。最后我们课外补充一下， The Sympathizer 同情者是在2015年出版，讨论移民或黑色幽默等，受到非常广泛的积极评价哦。以上是今天的讲解，谢谢收听。
That is it for today's lesson. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you decide to read this novel. Otherwise, our summary of the novel will have to suffice. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.